The huge glass room of the Galaxy Council was bigger than 10 football fields put together. Lights from 47 different worlds shone down on the curved walls, making rainbow patterns dance across the floor. Ambassador Taeho Kim walked through the giant metal doors that were taller than 3 men standing on each other's shoulders. His footsteps echoed in the quiet space as hundreds of alien eyes watched his every move. The human group was tiny compared to what everyone expected. Most alien races brought ships full of advisors and helpers and guards, but the humans only had 3 people. Taeho Kim wore a simple black suit that looked plain next to all the colorful robes and armor that filled the room. Behind him walked Dr. Hae-jin Park, carrying nothing but a small tablet computer. Her long black hair was tied back, and she looked completely calm even though they were surrounded by creatures that could kill them with a thought. The third human was Colonel Bio Ram Lee, and she stood straight like a soldier. Her uniform had no fancy decorations or shiny medals, just clean lines and practical design. She kept her hands at her sides, but everyone could tell she was ready for trouble if it came. The way she moved reminded the aliens of a hunting cat. Quiet and deadly. Council Speaker Vorthak was 12 feet tall with 6 arms and a head that looked like a giant praying mantis. His skin was green like old copper, and his 4 eyes could look in different directions. At the same time, those eyes were all focused on the humans now, and his mouth parts clicked together, making a sound like breaking glass. When he was nervous today, they were clicking very fast. For 6 months, their Galaxy Council had been planning this meeting. They had never met aliens quite like humans before. Most new species were either very weak and needed protection, or very aggressive and had to be controlled by force. Humans were different, and that made everyone scared. When humans first reached the stars 50 years ago, nobody paid much attention to them. They looked weak, with no natural weapons like claws or poison glands. Their home planet Earth was ordinary, with nothing special about it. The council experts predicted that humans would either die out in space or become servants to stronger races. Instead, something impossible happened. Humans spread across the galaxy faster than anyone thought possible. They built cities on worlds that should have killed them. They turned dead rocks into green gardens. They survived in places where even the toughest alien species would die in minutes. The thing that really terrified the council was what happened during the border wars last year. The reptilian empire had been attacking peaceful worlds on the outer edge of the galaxy for 20 years. Their huge war fleets had been stealing resources and enslaving entire populations. The council had tried to stop them many times, but always failed. The reptilians were too strong and too mean. Then humans got involved. One human fleet with just 50 ships flew straight into reptilian space. Nobody expected them to last more than a few hours against thousands of enemy warships. Instead, the humans destroyed the entire reptilian battle group without losing a single ship. They used weapons that nobody had ever seen before and fought in ways that made no sense according to military textbooks. After that victory, other alien races started asking questions about these strange humans. Some wanted to be friends with them, others wanted to hire human soldiers to protect their worlds. A few species even suggested that maybe the Galaxy Council was not as powerful as everyone thought. That was when the council decided they had to bring humans under control through treaties and laws. If they could make humans join the galactic government, then they could make rules about where humans could go and what they could do. The treaty package they prepared was the most generous offering galactic history. They offered human seats on the ruling council, which meant they would help make decisions for the whole galaxy. They offered exclusive trading rights that would make Earth the richest world in known space. They even offered to share ancient technologies that other species had spent thousands of years developing. Speaker Vorthak cleared his throat, which sounded like grinding metal. The huge chamber became silent as he began to read from the golden tablet in his hands. His voice was translated into human language by computers built into the walls. The first part of the treaty talked about how humans would get their own section of space to rule. This human zone would be bigger than what most alien empires controlled. After centuries of expansion, the council would help humans build better spaceships and teach them how to use weapons that could destroy entire star systems. The second part offered humans advanced medical technology that could make them live for Hundreds of years they would learn how to cure diseases that had killed millions of people on Earth. They would get machines that could regrow lost arms and legs and even bring people back from the edge of death. The third part was about knowledge. The council would open their secret libraries to human scientists. These libraries contained the collected wisdom of dozens of ancient civilizations, including maps of unexplored regions, star charts, showing safe travel routes and the locations of rare resources worth more than entire planets. As Speaker Vorthak continued reading, the offers got even more amazing. Humans would get their own seats in the Galactic Senate. They would have voting rights on all major decisions. They would be protected by Council military forces and could call for help if anyone attacked human worlds. The aliens in the chamber watched the humans carefully, trying to read their expressions. Most species would be jumping up and down with excitement at such generous terms. A few representatives whispered among themselves, wondering if the council was offering too much too quickly. Dr. Hai-Jin Park took notes on her tablet, but her face showed no emotion. Colonel Bo Ram Lee stood perfectly still like a statue. Ambassador Taeho Kim listened politely, nodding at appropriate moments but giving no hint about what he was thinking. When Speaker Vorthak finished reading the treaty terms, he set down the golden tablet and looked directly at Ambassador Kim. The chamber was so quiet that everyone could hear the soft humming of the air recycling systems. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. The most generous treaty offer in galactic history had been presented to the humans. Now they would surely accept and become part of the great galactic community. The council members felt relieved that this dangerous situation was finally under control. Ambassador Kim stood up slowly. His movement was calm and deliberate, like someone who had already made up his mind about something important. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of alien representatives from dozens of different worlds. "Thank you for your generous offer," he said in a clear voice that carried easily through the huge space. The translation computers hummed as they converted his words into 46 different alien languages. However, humanity must respectfully decline. For a moment nobody moved, nobody breathed, nobody even blinked. The words seemed to hang in the air like something solid that everyone could see. Several alien representatives made choking sounds. Others began chittering or buzzing or making whatever noise their species made. When shocked Speaker Vorthak mouth parts stopped clicking entirely, his four eyes all focused on Ambassador Kim, as if he could not believe what he had just heard. "Perhaps you need time to consider," he managed to say. "This treaty offers your species everything you could possibly want." Kim smiled, the kind of gentle smile that humans used when they were being polite but firm. "We appreciate your concern, but our answer remains the same. Humanity chooses to chart its own course among the stars." The silence that followed was broken by the sound of angry voices as representatives began talking all at once. Some demanded explanations, others suggested that the humans did not understand what they were refusing. A few began making threats about what would happen to species that refused to cooperate with the galactic community. Through all the noise, Ambassador Kim remained calm. He waited patiently for the shouting to die down, then spoke again. "We understand the honor you do us with this offer, but freedom cannot be given as a gift. It must be earned and protected by those who value it." And with those words, the Galaxy Council realized that they were facing something they had never encountered before. A species that valued its independence more than safety, more than wealth, more than power. The age of easy control over the galaxy was about to end. 3 weeks had passed since the humans said no to the greatest treaty offer in galactic history. The Galaxy Council building looked like a place hit by disaster. Emergency meetings happened every day and night. Alien representatives rushed through the hallways with worried expressions on their strange faces. Some looked like they had not slept in days. Council Security Chief Dongwu Shin sat in his small office, surrounded by stacks of reports about human activities. Each report made the situation look worse. The humans were not just refusing to join the galactic community, they were expanding faster than anyone thought possible. New human colonies appeared on star maps every few days like flowers blooming after rain. The security chief was a quiet man who preferred watching and listening to talking. His job was to know everything that happened in human space, and what he learned kept him awake at night. While the council was trying to force humans to accept their rules, humans were Busy proving those rules did not matter, his latest report sat on the desk glowing softly in the dim light. The numbers were incredible. In just 3 weeks, humans had started colonies on 7 new worlds most alien species took years to establish. Even one new settlement, humans seemed to do it as easily as breathing. The emergency meeting that morning was the largest ever held in Council history. Representatives from every major species crowded into the great chamber. Even species that rarely left their homeworlds had sent delegates. The air recycling systems worked overtime trying to handle so many different types of beings, breathing different kinds of gases. Speaker Vorthok looked older than his 800 years. His green skin had turned pale, and his clicking sounds were slower and more tired than usual. The stress of the situation was affecting everyone, but the council leadership felt it worse. They were supposed to maintain order in the galaxy, but one small species was making them look helpless. The Aquatic Federation representative rose from her water-filled chair. Her blue skin glistened under the chamber lights, and her gills fluttered nervously as she spoke through the translation device attached to her throat. They have colonized the water world of Kepler 442b, she announced. Her voice sounded like singing mixed with the sound of waves breaking on shore. Our best scientists studied that planet for decades. They said colonization was impossible. The water pressure would crush any known life form, and the chemical composition is toxic to all recorded species. Murmurs of disbelief filled the chamber. Several representatives checked their own data tablets, confirming the impossible news. The silicon-based collective delegate made a sound like grinding rocks as he processed this information. Yet humans are not only surviving there, he added in his slow mechanical voice, they are thriving. Our deep space monitoring stations show massive underwater cities already under construction. The rate of building suggests they will have a full colony operational within months, not years. What made the situation even worse was how other species were reacting to human success. The Feline Confederacy had always been proud and independent, but even they were starting to question council authority. Their representatives had been seen meeting secretly with human traders. Reports suggested they were considering leaving the council to make their own deals with humanity. The Avian Republic was even more troubling. Their flying cities had been loyal council members for over 2,000 years. But their latest communications suggested they were studying human expansion techniques, trying to learn how such rapid growth was possible. Some avian leaders were openly asking why they needed council permission to explore new territories. Ambassador So young Zhang arrived at their council headquarters in a simple shuttle that looked tiny next to the massive alien vessels surrounding it. She walked through the same giant doors that Taeho Kim had entered weeks before, but this time the atmosphere was different. The aliens looked desperate instead of confident. The new treaty package had taken the council best minds working day and night to create it was even more generous than the first offer, if such a thing was possible. This time they offered humans leadership positions in 3 major council committees. These were positions that usually took species centuries to earn. The expansion rights included in the new treaty were unlimited. Humans could claim any unoccupied territory in the Outer Rim sectors without asking permission first. This was territory larger than some entire galactic empire's territory that contained resources worth more than most planets' access to the restricted archives was the most valuable part of the offer. These secret files contained knowledge from civilizations that had existed before most current species had even evolved. The location of ancient weapon caches, star maps showing safe passages through dangerous regions, and the secret histories of every major galactic power. The presentation lasted 6 hours. Representative after representative stood up to explain the benefits of galactic cooperation. They talked about the dangers of isolation and the strength that came from unity. They showed holographic displays of successful council member worlds with their peaceful cities and prosperous populations. When the presentation finally ended, Ambassador Zhang sat quietly for several minutes. The entire chamber waited for her response, hoping desperately that this time humans would see reason. The silence stretched on until some representatives began shifting nervously in their seats. Your offer is indeed generous, she finally said in the same calm tone that had become familiar to council members, but humanity's position has not changed. We believe in earning our place in the galaxy through our own efforts, not through treaties that bind us to others' expectations. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Several representatives jumped to their feet, shouting in their own languages. The translation computers struggled to keep up with the flood of angry words that filled the chamber. Security guards moved closer to the human ambassador, but she remained perfectly calm. The Reptilian Empire delegate slammed his clawed hand on his desk hard enough to crack the metal surface. "How dare you refuse such generosity?" he roared. His scarred face was twisted with rage, and his yellow eyes glowed with fury. "Your arrogance will be your downfall." Other representatives joined in the shouting. Some demanded that humans be forced to accept council authority. Others suggested economic sanctions or military action. A few of the more peaceful species tried to calm everyone down, but their voices were lost in the chaos. Through it all, Ambassador Zhang sat quietly, waiting for the storm to pass. She had expected this reaction. Humans had studied galactic politics carefully before making their decision. They knew that refusing the council offer would make many species angry. When the shouting finally died down, Zhang stood up to address the chamber one final time. Her voice was clear and steady, cutting through the tension like a blade through cloth. "We understand your frustration," she said, "but humanity has learned from our own history that freedom cannot be negotiated or bargained, for it must be protected at any cost. We do not seek to harm the council or its members. We simply ask for the right to choose our own destiny." The chamber fell silent again, but this time it was a different kind of quiet. It was the silence of beings who were beginning to understand that they were facing something completely new in galactic history. A species that valued its independence more than security, more than wealth, more than the approval of others. As Ambassador Zhang prepared to leave, the chamber speaker Vorthak made one last desperate attempt. "Perhaps we could arrange a compromise," he suggested. "Some form of limited membership that would give you independence while still maintaining ties to the galactic community." Zhang paused at the door and looked back at the alien leader with something that might have been sympathy. "The council has maintained order through control and compliance for thousands of years," she said. "But there are other ways to build a civilization. Perhaps it is time for the galaxy to learn what those ways might be." With those words, she walked out of the chamber, leaving behind a room full of aliens who were beginning to realize that their old ways of doing things might not work anymore. The age of absolute council authority was starting to crack, and nobody knew what would happen when it finally broke apart. The humans had refused again, and this time their refusal felt like a challenge that would change everything. The diplomatic ship Concordia was the largest vessel ever built for peaceful meetings. It was bigger than most space stations, with meeting rooms that could hold thousands of beings from different worlds. The ship floated in neutral space halfway between council territory and the growing human colonies. Its hull gleamed like silver in the light from nearby stars. Intelligence Director Min-Soo Park walked through corridors lined with artwork from dozens of different civilizations. The walls showed the history of galactic cooperation, paintings and sculptures that celebrated thousands of years of peace through unity. But today those symbols felt hollow, like decorations on a building that was falling down. The main conference room had been specially prepared for this meeting. 12 of the most powerful beings in the galaxy sat around a table made from crystal that had been mined from the core of a dead star. Each representative had brought their species' most important leaders, people who controlled the fate of billions of citizens across hundreds of worlds. High Chancellor Zarian of the Reptilian Empire dominated one side of the table. His massive frame was covered in scars from ancient battles, and his yellow eyes burned with barely controlled anger. The reptilians had ruled through fear and strength for centuries, but even they were worried about what humans might do. Next, the Trading Guild representative was a thin creature with 6 arms that moved constantly as he spoke. His species had controlled galactic commerce for so long that they thought of trade routes and shipping schedules as natural laws, but human merchants were offering better deals and faster delivery than anyone thought possible. Dr. Park took her seat across from beings that could destroy entire solar systems with a single command. Yet she looked as calm as someone attending a friendly neighborhood meeting. Her simple clothes and quiet manner made her seem almost invisible next to the elaborate robes and ceremonial armor of the alien leaders. The Holographic displays around the room showed charts and graphs and tactical analyses, all designed to prove that humanity was disrupting the natural order of things. Economic reports showed how human trade was undermining established business relationships. Military assessments warned that human expansion threatened strategic balances that had kept peace for millennia. Social stability reports were the most frightening of all. They showed that 17 different species had requested changes to their council agreements. Some wanted more independence in their internal affairs. Others questioned why they needed council permission to explore new territories. A few had even suggested that maybe the old ways were not the only ways. High Chancellor Zarian leaned forward, his voice like the rumble of distant thunder. "Your species is destroying everything we have built," he said. His clawed hands gripped the crystal table, hard enough to leave scratches. For 10,000 years, the Council has maintained peace through cooperation and compromise. You humans threaten to tear apart the very fabric of galactic civilization. The medical consortium representative was a floating blob of intelligent gas that glowed different colors. When it was emotional right now, it was pulsing angry red as it spoke. Through its translation device, human doctors are sharing advanced treatments freely without proper licensing or regulation. They complain they are disrupting medical procedures that have been perfected over millennia. The Technology Commission delegate looked like a walking computer with mechanical parts visible under transparent skin panels. Human innovations ignore established scientific principles, they said in a voice like electronic music. They create devices that should not work according to known physics, yet somehow function perfectly. Park listened patiently as each representative outlined their concerns. She had expected this meeting to be more like a trial than a negotiation. The Council was no longer trying to win human cooperation. They were trying to force human submission through fear and intimidation. "We are not trying to threaten anyone," Park replied when they finished their accusations. "We are simply living according to our own values. Humanity believes in freedom, innovation, and the right to choose our own destiny. These are not attacks on your civilization. They are expressions of our own." The spiritual assembly representative was a being of pure energy that looked like a small star floating above its chair. Its voice resonated through the room like beautiful music, but the words carried an undertone of warning. "Your independence inspires others to question the natural order," it said. "Already 17 species have requested amendments to their council agreements. Some speak of leaving entirely. That is their choice to make," Park said simply. The statement sent a ripple of shock through the room. For thousands of years, the Council had operated on the principle that some choices were too dangerous to be left to individual species. The idea that beings might be free to make their own decisions, even bad ones, was revolutionary and terrifying. The meeting continued for hours as the Council delegates presented increasingly desperate arguments. They offered humanity complete autonomy within the Council structure, meaning humans could make their own laws while still being part of the galactic government. They suggested creating a human sector with its own governing body that would answer only to human leadership. Each offer was politely but firmly declined. Park explained that any system that required permission from others was not true freedom. Humanity had learned through centuries of struggle that independence could not be given as a gift. It had to be earned and protected. The Technology Commission delegate tried a different approach. "Perhaps you fear that joining the Council would limit your scientific advancement," they suggested. "We could offer you access to research facilities that make your current laboratories look primitive." "We appreciate the offer," Park replied, "but we prefer to make our own discoveries. Learning something new is more valuable than being given knowledge we did not earn." The Trading Guild representative spread his 6 arms in a gesture of disbelief. "But think of the profits," they exclaimed. "Human merchants could become the wealthiest beings in the galaxy if they worked within our established systems." "Money is useful," Park agreed, "but freedom is priceless." As the meeting approached its end, High Chancellor Zarian decided to drop all pretense of diplomacy. He leaned forward until his scarred face was close to the human representative, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "You realize that your refusal to cooperate could be seen as an act of aggression against the galactic community." The room fell silent. Everyone understood that a line had just been crossed. The Council was no longer asking or even demanding. They were threatening. Park met the reptilian leader gaze. steadily showing no sign of fear or intimidation is the Galaxy Council threatening humanity Chancellor. She asked. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They had all heard stories about what happened to species that threatened humans. The border wars had shown that humans responded to threats very differently than other species expected. Most beings back down when faced with superior numbers. Humans seem to get more dangerous. We are simply pointing out that isolation has consequences. Zarian said, backing down slightly from his earlier threat. So does Freedom Park, replied, standing. To leave humanity learned long ago that some things are worth any price. As she walked toward the door, every alien in the room watched her leave. They were beginning to understand that they were not dealing with a normal species. Humans did not think like other beings. They did not value the same things. They did not fear the same consequences. The meeting had been intended to show humans the futility of standing alone against the combined might of the galaxy. Instead, it had revealed something far more disturbing. The humans were not afraid. They were not backing down. They were not going to surrender their freedom, no matter what the cost. When the door closed behind Park, the remaining delegates sat in uncomfortable silence. They had just discovered that their threats were meaningless against a species that valued freedom more than life itself. The Galaxy Council had run out of peaceful options, and everyone in that room knew what came next. The question was whether they were brave enough or desperate enough to find out what happened when someone declared war on humanity. Part 3, Desperate Measures and Growing Fear. The diplomatic ship Concordia was the largest vessel ever built for peaceful meetings. It was bigger than most space stations, with meeting rooms that could hold thousands of beings from different worlds. The ship floated in neutral space halfway between Council territory and the growing human colonies. Its hull gleamed like silver in the light from nearby. Star's intelligence director Min Soo Park walked through corridors lined with artwork from dozens of different civilizations. The walls showed the history of galactic cooperation, paintings and sculptures that celebrated thousands of years of peace through unity. But today those symbols felt hollow, like decorations on a building that was falling down. The main conference room had been specially prepared for this meeting. 12 of the most powerful beings in the galaxy sat around a table made from crystal that had been mined from the core of a dead star. Each representative had brought their species most important leaders, people who controlled the fate of billions of citizens across hundreds of worlds. High Chancellor Zarian of the Reptilian Empire dominated one side of the table. His massive frame was covered in scars from ancient battles, and his yellow eyes burned with barely controlled. 6 months had passed since the first meeting between humans and the Galaxy Council, and the situation had grown worse with each passing day. 3 more species had formally withdrawn from Council agreements, citing humanity example as inspiration for their own independence movements. The carefully maintained balance of galactic power was crumbling like an ancient building in an earthquake. The Council emergency sessions had become daily events. Representatives arrived looking more tired and desperate each time. Some species were beginning to question whether the Council could survive this crisis. Others whispered about what would happen if more members decided to leave. The unthinkable was becoming reality. The Galaxy Council might actually fall apart. Fleet Admiral Chang Ho Moon stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching sensor displays that showed the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. Over 3,000 ships from 20 different species hung in perfect formation just outside human space. Their combined firepower could turn entire worlds into ash and dust. The message they brought was simple: humanity would accept galactic citizenship and submit to Council authority or face the consequences of their continued defiance. The Council had given humans 24 hours to decide between surrender and destruction. Admiral Moon was a calm man who had spent his life studying military history and strategy. He had read about every major battle fought in the galaxy over the past 1,000 years. He knew that no force in recorded history had ever faced odds like these and survived. The smart thing to do would be to surrender immediately and hope for mercy. Instead, he was planning to attack. Captain Yunji Nam stood beside him, studying the tactical displays with the focused attention of a predator watching prey. She was young for her rank, but had earned her position through brilliant strategic thinking during the border wars. Her analysis of the enemy fleet was both thorough and terrifying. "They have brought everything, sir," she reported, highlighting different sections of the massive armada. Reptilian battle cruisers, enough firepower to crack planets, aquatic torpedo boats that can strike from unexpected angles, silicon-based mining ships converted to weapons platforms with industrial-grade cutting beams. And that is just the front line. Behind the warships were support vessels carrying millions of troops, transport craft loaded with occupation forces and mobile factories that could build new weapons during extended campaigns. The Council had prepared for a war that might last years. They were not taking any chances with humanity. The Council ultimatum had been broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring that every human colony could hear the demand for surrender. The message was clear: join the galactic community willingly or be forced to join as conquered subjects. There would be no third option. Admiral Moon's response was equally clear and broadcast just as widely to the Galaxy Council fleet: humanity appreciates your show of force. However, our answer remains unchanged. We will not surrender our freedom for the illusion of security. The words sent shockwaves through both fleets. Council ship captains could not believe that humans were still refusing to surrender even when faced with impossible odds. Many had expected immediate capitulation followed by desperate pleas for mercy. Instead, they heard the same calm defiance that had characterized every human response. The Council fleet response was swift and devastating. They opened fire on an unmanned human monitoring station, vaporizing it completely in seconds. The energy discharge was visible across several star systems, a deliberate demonstration of the overwhelming force arrayed against humanity. The message was unmistakable: submit or be destroyed. What happened next would be studied in military academies throughout the galaxy for generations to come. Instead of retreating or surrendering, the human fleet advanced. Admiral Moon had only 200 ships compared to the Council 3,000, but he had something they did not understand: human unpredictability. The Council expected humans to fight like other species, using conventional tactics and strategies that could be countered through superior numbers. Instead, the human fleet split into dozens of small groups, each attacking from different vectors using tactics that defied conventional military wisdom. Some groups used ramming attacks, turning their ships into guided missiles aimed at critical enemy vessels. Others deployed jury-rigged weapons that should not have worked according to known physics, but somehow functioned perfectly. The first hour of battle was chaos as Council commanders tried to adapt to human tactics that made no logical sense. Human ships attacked targets they should have ignored while ignoring obvious strategic objectives. They used damaged vessels as decoys, while perfectly functional ships retreated from winning positions only to attack from completely different angles. Captain Nam coordinated the battle from the flagship, her voice calm and steady as she issued orders that would have seemed insane to any traditional military mind. Launch torpedoes spread at coordinates that have no enemy ships. She commanded, prepare ramming course for the command vessel. Signal all units to ignore the battle cruisers and focus on supply ships. The Council fleet outnumbered the humans 15-1, but found themselves unable to use that advantage effectively. Human tactics scattered their forces across too wide an area, making it impossible to bring overwhelming firepower to bear on any single target. When they tried to regroup, humans would appear behind their lines, attacking vulnerable support vessels. 3 hours into the battle, the first Council ships began to retreat. These were not cowards running from danger, but experienced military commanders who recognized that their tactical doctrine was useless against an enemy that refused to follow established rules of engagement. Admiral Moon watched the retreat begin with grim satisfaction. The Council had expected to crush human resistance through superior numbers, but had discovered that numbers meant nothing when facing an enemy that fought like no one else in the galaxy. The breakthrough came when human engineers managed to jury-rig a communications jamming system using parts from damaged ships. Within minutes, the Council fleet lost coordination between different species groups. Reptilian commanders could not communicate with aquatic captains. Silicon-based vessels could not coordinate with gas giant dwellers without communication. The massive Council armada became a collection of individual fleets, each fighting its own separate battle. Human forces exploited this confusion, ruthlessly attacking coordination vessels and command ships while avoiding direct confrontation with the heaviest weapons. By the 6th hour, Council losses had climbed above 50%, while human casualties remained surprisingly light. The impossible was happening. A force outnumbered 15 to 1 was winning through tactics that should not have worked. High Chancellor Zarian aboard the Council flagship could not believe the reports flooding in from across the battle zone. His perfect armada was falling apart under assault from a handful of human ships using weapons and tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare demand. Their surrender, he ordered his communications officer offer them terms. Tell them they can have anything they want if they just stop fighting. The human response came back within minutes, Admiral. Moon voice calm and professional. Thank you for the offer, Chancellor. However, we already have everything we want. The right to be free. As the battle entered its final phase, more council ships began retreating. Some captains claimed mechanical failures, while others reported that their crews were refusing to fight against an enemy that seemed impossible to defeat. The great galactic armada that had assembled to crush human independence was scattering like leaves in a storm. The final casualty count would show that the Council had lost over 60% of their fleet, while humans had lost less than 30 ships. It was the most lopsided military defeat in galactic history, made even more humiliating by the fact that it had been inflicted by a species that had been spacefaring for less than a century. When the last Council ship jumped to hyperspace, Admiral Moon stood alone on his bridge, looking out at the debris field that marked the site of the impossible victory around him. His crew worked quietly to rescue survivors from both sides, because that was what humans did even after winning battles. The defeat would send shockwaves throughout the galaxy as species leaders realized that the mighty Council military had been broken by a force they outnumbered 15 to 1. More importantly, they would realize that there was an alternative to Council rule, one that had just proven it could defend itself against any threat. The age of Council dominance was ending, and the age of freedom was about to begin. The Council defeat sent shockwaves through every inhabited system in the galaxy. Emergency sessions were called on major worlds as species leaders tried to understand how their combined military might have been so thoroughly humiliated. News of the battle spread faster than light through quantum communication networks, carrying with it a message that challenged everything the galactic community believed about power and control. The Kyung Min Lee walked through the council chambers that had once seemed so impressive and intimidating. Now they looked different, somehow smaller and less important. The beings who had once commanded the fate of entire civilizations sat in their seats, looking confused and defeated, like children who had just learned that their parents were not as strong as they had believed. The chamber was packed beyond capacity. Representatives from species that had never shown interest in council politics were present, along with delegates from worlds that had been considering independence movements for decades. Everyone wanted to understand how the impossible had happened. Speaker Vorthak looked like he had aged decades in the weeks since the military disaster. His green skin had turned pale and gray, while his once commanding presence had shrunk to something frail and uncertain. When he spoke, his voice barely carried through the chamber. We need to understand, he said, the words coming out slowly and painfully. How is this possible? Your species has been spacefaring for less than a century. We have been building our civilizations for millennia. We have technologies that predate your entire evolutionary history. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Dr. Lee looked around the chamber, seeing fear and confusion in every alien face. These beings had built their entire society on the premise that age meant wisdom, that experience guaranteed victory, and that cooperation was the only path to survival. Humanity's success, despite rejecting their system, challenged everything they held sacred. You want to know our secret? Dr. Lee asked. Her voice was calm and steady, cutting through the tension in the room. It is not technology or tactics or some hidden advantage. It is something much simpler and much more dangerous to your way of thinking. The chamber held its collective breath. Representatives leaned forward in their seats, desperate to understand what had made humans so effective. Some had theories about secret weapons or advanced training programs. Others suspected that humans had made alliances with unknown alien species. Humans refuse to accept that something is impossible just because someone else says it is. Dr. Lee continued. When you told us we could not survive on Kepler 442, we did not debate whether you were right. We went there and proved you wrong. When you said your military alliance was unbeatable, we did not surrender. We found a way to wind the medical consortium representative a floating mass of intelligent tissue, pulsed with agitated colors, but your losses surely you must see that conflict is wasteful compared to cooperation. Why choose to fight when you could have had everything through peaceful means? Of course, conflict has cost, Dr. Lee agreed, but so does surrendering your freedom. Humans learned long ago that some things are worth fighting for even when the odds seem impossible. The spiritual assembly delegate glowed brighter as its emotions intensified. Your independence is causing chaos throughout the galaxy, it said in harmonious tones that somehow managed to sound threatening. Species are abandoning the cooperative principles that have kept peace for millennia. Maybe it is time for a new kind of peace, Dr. Lee suggested, one based on mutual respect rather than forced compliance. The chamber erupted as representatives began arguing among themselves. Some called for renewed military action against humanity, insisting that the recent defeat had been a fluke that could not be repeated. Others suggested finding ways to accommodate human independence within the existing system. The trading guild representative waved his 6 arms frantically, trying to get attention. Our economic models show that continued fragmentation will lead to chaos, he shouted. Trade routes that have existed for thousands of years are being disrupted. New currencies are appearing that ignore established exchange rates. The Technology Commission delegate processed information at computer speed before responding. Human innovations are being copied by other species without proper licensing or safety testing. He reported dangerous experiments are being conducted by beings who lack the wisdom to understand the consequences. Through all the shouting and arguing, Dr. Lee remained calm, waiting for the noise to die down. She had expected this reaction. Humans had studied galactic politics long enough to know that change always frightened those who benefited from the old ways. When the chamber finally quieted, she delivered her final message. Humanity does not want to destroy your council or conquer your worlds. We just want the right to exist on our own terms. If that inspires others to seek their own freedom, perhaps it is because freedom is something worth having. The Aquatic Federation representative rose from her water-filled chair, her gills fluttering with agitation. But without central authority, how do we prevent wars? She asked. How do we maintain the trade agreements that keep our economies stable? How do we resolve disputes between species with different values and goals, the same way humans have always prevented wars among themselves? Dr. Lee replied through strength, diplomacy, and the understanding that everyone benefits more from trade than from conquest. High Chancellor Zarian leaned forward, his scarred face twisted with frustration. Your species has been at war with itself for most of your recorded history, he pointed out. How can you claim that your methods lead to peace? Exactly, Dr. Lee said with a slight smile, and look how strong it made us. Conflict is not always bad if it drives innovation and progress. Peace through surrender might be comfortable, but it does not make you grow. The statement sent another ripple of shock through the chamber. For thousands of years, the council had taught that conflict was wasteful, that cooperation was always preferable to competition. The idea that struggle might actually strengthen a species was revolutionary. The silicon-based collective delegate made grinding sounds as he processed this information. But the casualties, he said, the resources wasted on military development, the time spent on conflict instead of advancement, those are the costs of freedom, Dr. Lee acknowledged. But consider the alternative. You have had peace for millennia, and where has it gotten you? A single species that refuses to follow your rules can defeat your combined armies. Because you have grown soft from always taking the easy path. The accusation stung because it contained truth. The council species had become comfortable relying on established systems and proven methods. They had forgotten how to adapt to new challenges or think creatively about problems. Speaker Vorthek made one last desperate attempt to find common ground. What would it take for humanity to help maintain galactic stability through some form of voluntary cooperation? He asked. Dr. Lee considered the question carefully. She understood that the council was not evil, just afraid of change. They had maintained peace through control for so long that they could not imagine any other way. When you stop trying to control everyone and start trusting them to make good choices, you might be surprised by what becomes possible, she said. That is the difference between ruling and leading, between compliance and cooperation. As the meeting ended and Dr. Lee, prepared to leave, representatives from dozens of species watched her go. Some looked angry, others appeared thoughtful, a few seemed almost hopeful, as if they were beginning to glimpse possibilities they had never considered before. The Galaxy Council age of absolute authority was ending, but something new was being born in its place. The question was whether the old guard would adapt to the changing galaxy or be swept away by the tide of freedom they could no longer hold back in. The end, the choice would be theirs, but the example had been set. Humanity had shown that independence was possible. That strength came from struggle. And that freedom was worth any price. The galaxy would never be the same. 1 year had passed since humanity's first rejection of the Council Treaty, and the galaxy was a completely different place. 18 species had withdrawn from Council control, forming loose alliances based on mutual benefit rather than enforced cooperation. The rigid hierarchy that had dominated galactic politics for 10,000 years was crumbling like an ancient monument, finally succumbing to time. Ambassador Jin Wu Kang walked through corridors that had once echoed with the confident voices of beings who controlled hundreds of worlds. Now those same corridors felt empty and uncertain. The few remaining council members moved quietly through halls that had been designed to showcase their power and authority. The great chamber, where humanity had first refused the council's generous offer, looked smaller. Now, with so many empty seats where representatives had once sat, species after species had followed the human example, choosing independence over security, freedom over the comfortable cage of council protection. Speaker Vorthak sat in his elevated chair, looking down at the handful of delegates who still attended council sessions. His once impressive presence had withered over the months of crisis, and his voice carried none of its former authority. When he spoke, it was with the weariness of someone who had watched his entire world change beyond recognition. The situation is becoming impossible, he admitted to the nearly empty chamber. Without unified authority, trade disputes are multiplying faster than we can resolve them. Territorial conflicts are increasing as species expand into regions that were once regulated by council law. Some species are developing weapons that threaten galactic stability. Ambassador Kang listened politely from his seat in the human section. The irony was not lost on him that humanity was now being asked to help solve problems created by the very freedom they had insisted upon. The council, that had once threatened to destroy human independence, was now begging for human assistance. Sounds like freedom, Kang observed mildly. High Chancellor Zarian slammed his clawed hand on his desk hard enough to crack the ancient wood. It is chaos, he snapped, though his anger now seemed more desperate than threatening. Without central control, species are making decisions based on their own interests rather than galactic stability. Growing pains, Kang corrected. You have kept the galaxy in a state of enforced childhood for millennia. Now that species are learning to make their own decisions, there is bound to be some confusion. The few remaining council delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The human ambassador words contained an uncomfortable truth. They had maintained peace by preventing growth, by keeping species dependent on council authority rather than developing their own strength and wisdom. The medical consortium representative glowed with frustrated colors as it spoke, but the inefficiencies it complained medical treatments are being shared freely without proper testing or regulation. Some species are using human healing techniques without understanding the risks. That is their choice to make, Kang replied. The statement sent a familiar chill through the chamber. For the remaining council members, the idea that beings should be free to make potentially dangerous choices was still terrifying. They had spent millennia protecting species from their own mistakes. The council had called this meeting to make one final offer to humanity: joint leadership of a reformed galactic government that would preserve order while allowing greater independence for member species. It was a complete reversal of their original position, offering humans everything they had once tried to deny them. Your proposal has merit, Kang acknowledged after listening to their detailed presentation, but it still assumes that someone needs to be in charge of everyone. Else humanity's position has not changed. We believe each species should be free to choose its own path. The Aquatic Federation representative spoke from her water-filled environment suit. But without central authority, how do we prevent wars? She asked. Her voice carried the fear that had haunted galactic politics since the council began to crumble. The same way humans have always prevented wars among themselves, Kang replied. through strength, diplomacy, and the understanding that everyone benefits more from trade than from conquest. Your species has been at war with itself for most of your recorded history, Zarian pointed out, desperately trying to find some flaw in human logic. Exactly, Kang said, with a smile that had become familiar to council members. And look how strong it made us. Conflict is not always bad. If it drives innovation and progress, peace through surrender might be comfortable, but it does not make you grow. The trading guild representative waved his multiple arms in exasperation. But the economic disruption, he protested, trade routes that existed for thousands of years are being abandoned. New economic systems are appearing that ignore established regulations. Markets adapt, Kong said simply. Strong business survive, weak ones fail. That is how economies grow and improve. The technology commission delegate processed data at electronic speed before responding, but the safety violations, he reported. Species are experimenting with dangerous technologies without proper oversight. Some are developing weapons that could threaten entire star systems, then other species will develop defenses, Kang replied. That is how progress works, through challenge and response, not through preventing anyone from trying new things. Speaker Vorthak made one final desperate attempt. What if we simply dissolve the council entirely, he asked. Would humanity be willing to help maintain galactic stability through voluntary cooperation? The question represented the ultimate surrender of everything the council had stood for 10,000 years. They had insisted that central authority was necessary for galactic peace. Now they were asking if maybe the humans had been right all along. Kong paused at the chamber doors, considering the question carefully. He understood that this moment would define the galaxy future. The old order was dying, and whatever replaced it would shape the lives of trillions of beings across thousands of worlds. Now you are starting to understand, he said finally, when you stop trying to control everyone and start trusting them to make good choices, you might be surprised by what becomes possible. The words hung in the air like a benediction or perhaps a challenge. The few remaining council members sat in silence, contemplating a future without the authority and control that had defined their existence. As Kang prepared to leave, Speaker Vorthak asked one last question. But what if species make the wrong choices? What if freedom leads to chaos and destruction? Then they will learn from their mistakes and make better choices next time. Kong replied, that is what freedom means, the right to fail and the opportunity to try again. The chamber doors closed behind the human ambassador, leaving the council delegates alone with their thoughts. The galaxy was changing whether they wanted it to or not. Species were choosing independence over security, growth over stability, freedom over the comfortable predictability of council rule. In the months that followed, the remaining council structure would quietly dissolve, not through revolution or conquest, but through simple irrelevance, as species learned to govern themselves and solve their own problems. The need for central authority simply faded away. Trade continued between independent worlds, often more efficiently than before. Conflicts arose and were resolved through negotiation or force, depending on the circumstances. Some